Right now, microplastic particles smaller than a human hair are circulating through your bloodstream. A study from Amsterdam in 2023 found them in the blood of 90% of adults tested, regardless of diet, age, or location. A separate study identified them in human liver tissue, in brain matter, even in the placenta of newborns who had never seen the outside world. This is Dr. Kenzo longevity. There is an honest thing nobody says. No food on earth flushes microplastic completely out of your body once it has settled in your tissues. What specific foods actually do, and this is well documented in the research literature, is support your liver during its normal phase 2 detoxification work. They reduce the binding of new microplastic particles in the gut before those particles reach your bloodstream, and they lower the systemic inflammation those particles trigger inside your liver. Today, I'm walking you through 5 foods that have measured exactly that in clinical trials, in adults over 50, with real data and no promise of a complete cleanse you cannot deliver. One of them has been documented in Ayurvedic medicine for 2,000 years, and 3 of them cost less than $2 per week at any grocery store in the country. Quick thing before we go further. If this kind of breakdown is what you've been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. There is a new video on this channel every day on the next strange thing your body is doing right now without your permission. Now back to the mechanism, because you have to understand why the liver becomes the target of microplastic burden in the first place. The liver is the only organ in your body that sees every substance from your digestive tract before anything else does, including your bloodstream and your other organs. Everything you swallow gets transported through the portal vein directly to the liver, and the liver filters it against a list of harmful or foreign substances it has evolved to recognize. Microplastic particles that land in the liver get deposited there because the liver has no evolutionary mechanism for breaking down synthetic polymer chains that did not exist 100 years ago. When particles accumulate, they activate a signaling pathway called NF-kappa B, which is the master switch for chronic inflammation in liver cells, also called hepatocytes. Studies from 2024 document that microplastics in the liver lower the activity of phase 1 detoxification enzymes while simultaneously raising oxidative stress to a measurable degree. In other words, the particles slow down the very system you need to get rid of them, a kind of biological traffic jam that reinforces itself over years of low-level exposure. But the liver has a second system called phase 2 detoxification, and this is where dietary intervention can actually move the needle in measurable ways. Phase 2 takes harmful substances, attaches a water-soluble group to them, and enables their excretion through bile, stool, or urine, turning fat-soluble threats into water-soluble waste. Specific foods contain compounds that upregulate these phase 2 enzymes, sometimes by 3 to 4 times within a few days of consistent consumption. That is the window where food actually helps. Not through magic, but through activation of a metabolic pathway that runs below its optimum in most adults over 50. Let me walk you through the 5, in order of the strength of their scientific evidence for liver support against microplastic exposure. Quick question before we go deeper. Tell me in the comments on what country you're watching from. The biology is the same everywhere, but the microplastic burden in different food supplies is not, and the cultural patterns around detox advice are not either. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because what's coming next changes how you'll think about your daily meals permanently. Food number 1 is broccoli, or more specifically, broccoli sprouts, the young shoots that are 3 to 4 days old and barely visible above the seed shell. Broccoli sprouts contain between 20 and 100 times more sulforaphane than mature broccoli, and sulforaphane is the most well-studied compound for phase 2 enzyme activation in human research. A study from Johns Hopkins University demonstrated that sulforaphane increases the activity of glutathione S-transferase by up to 400%. That is the primary enzyme that binds toxins to glutathione. Glutathione is your strongest cellular antioxidant and the main carrier for the excretion of fat-soluble toxins, including the compounds that come along with environmental microplastic exposure. A controlled study from 2019 on adults over 50 documented that 40 grams of broccoli sprouts daily for 12 weeks lowered liver inflammation markers by 18%. A second study conducted in a heavily polluted Chinese industrial region showed that sulforaphane-rich sprouts increased the urinary excretion of environmental toxins like benzene and acrolein by 60%. That is not a theoretical effect. That is a measurable increase in the excretion of substances that would otherwise accumulate in the liver and drive the inflammation we just discussed. The practical application is simple. About 2 tablespoons of sprouts per day, raw or lightly steamed, never cooked over 60 degrees Celsius because heat destroys sulforaphane completely. You can grow them at home in 3 days. Broccoli seeds, a glass jar with a mesh lid, water, sunlight, about 50 cents per week of cost without plastic packaging from the store. Food number 2 is turmeric, the orange root from Ayurvedic tradition with its active compound called curcumin and a documented history going back 2,000 years. Turmeric works on a different pathway than broccoli. It directly inhibits the NF-kappa B signal, which is the master switch microplastic exposure activates in the liver. A meta-analysis from 2022 combined data from 13 clinical trials and confirmed that curcumin supplementation measurably reduces liver inflammation markers like ALT and AST in human studies. A separate trial in adults with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease showed that daily curcumin over 8 weeks reduced liver fat mass on ultrasound imaging by an average of 77%. That is a real structural change measured by imaging, not just a blood marker hinting at a trend, and it suggests genuine tissue-level modification of the liver's metabolic state. But curcumin alone is poorly absorbed by the gut. Less than 3% reaches the bloodstream, and that has been the bioavailability barrier in research for the last 40 years. Ayurvedic tradition knew, 2,000 years before anyone could name the mechanism, that turmeric must always be combined with two things: a fat source and black pepper. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine, which increases the bioavailability of curcumin by approximately 2,000%, a 20-fold increase documented across multiple clinical studies. The practical application: 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, a pinch of black pepper, 1 tablespoon of olive oil or coconut oil mixed in a cup of warm water or unsweetened plant milk. Drink it once daily, ideally in the morning on an empty stomach, and the effect on liver inflammation becomes measurable in most studies between 8 and 12 weeks of consistent consumption. Quick thing, what I just covered is the surface, and there is a complete protocol that takes everything you just heard and turns it into something you actually do every day. It's called Reset, the 14-day brain reboot, with day-by-day instructions, exact dosages, timing windows, and the science behind each one explained the same way I just walked through these mechanisms. Built around the same biological systems covered on this channel: Phase 2 detoxification, NF-kappa B inhibition, glutathione metabolism, and the daily routines that support these systems together. The 14-day timeline is structured so you can measure your own changes: energy, digestion, sleep quality, and skin clarity as visible markers of liver function operating below or above its baseline. Less than $10 for the entire protocol, less than the cost of a single coffee per day across 2 weeks with lifetime access, and updates included automatically. First link in the description below this video. But stay here, because the next 3 foods are the least known and also the most effective in the current research literature. Food number 3 is psyllium husk, a soluble fiber from the seed husks of the Plantago ovata plant, found in most pharmacies under names like Metamucil or generic equivalents. Psyllium works differently from broccoli or turmeric. It does not target microplastic in the liver, but in the gut, before the particles can even be absorbed into your bloodstream. A study from 2024 showed that soluble fibers like psyllium physically bind microplastic particles in the digestive tract and reduce their uptake across the intestinal wall. The mechanism is straightforward. The fibers form a gel-like matrix in the gut that traps particles and fat-soluble pollutants before they can reach the intestinal lining. The entire matrix is then excreted through stool, taking the bound particles with it, a kind of biological sieve that has to be rebuilt fresh every day with each dose. A controlled study on adults over 50 showed that 10 grams of psyllium daily over 8 weeks reduced LDL cholesterol by 7% and measurably diversified the gut microbiome. The practical application: 1 heaping tablespoon of psyllium husk, about 5 to 10 grams, stirred into 300 milliliters of water, drunk immediately, followed by a second glass of water. Important: psyllium must be taken with sufficient fluid, otherwise it can swell in the throat or esophagus and accumulate there, which is a real risk in older adults with reduced swallowing strength. Do not take it within an hour of medications, because it can delay the absorption of thyroid hormones, blood pressure medications, and several other drugs you may be relying on. Take psyllium ideally on an empty stomach in the morning, or in the evening, at least 2 hours after your last meal, to use the binding action in the gut at full strength. A lesser-known additional effect: psyllium feeds the beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, and butyrate strengthens the intestinal barrier against microplastic penetration. Food number 4 is green tea, or more specifically, the catechin called epigallocatechin gallate, abbreviated as EGCG in the research literature. EGCG activates a metabolic pathway called NRF2, which upregulates the same phase 2 detoxification machinery as sulforaphane from broccoli, but through a different receptor route into the cell. A study from 2023 documented that daily green tea over 12 weeks raised glutathione concentrations in the livers of adults over 50 by 22%. Glutathione is the central substance that binds fat-soluble pollutants like bisphenol A, a compound that often accompanies microplastic exposure, and tags them for excretion through bile. A second trial on 350 adults with elevated liver enzymes showed that 3 cups of green tea daily over 3 months reduced ALT values by an average of 14%. But here's the trap most people don't know about. Tea bags themselves are often a source of microplastic, especially the pyramid-shaped ones made of plastic mesh. A Canadian study from 2019 found that a single pyramid-style plastic tea bag releases approximately 11 billion microplastic particles into the cup when steeped in hot water. That partly cancels out the benefit of the green tea you came for, so use loose-leaf tea in a stainless steel or glass infuser, never plastic pyramid bags from the supermarket. The dose, 2 to 3 cups daily with about 2 grams of dry tea per cup, water at 80 degrees Celsius, 3 minutes of steeping, no sugar, no milk, no sweeteners. Quick observation, if you've made it this far, you already understand more about liver detoxification than 90% of adults walking into a primary care visit. The reset protocol takes that understanding and gives it shape over 14 days. First link in the description, less than $10 for the complete sequence. And if this kind of breakdown is what you've been looking for, subscribe. Now stay with me, because the next food is the one that surprises everyone the most. Food number 5 is the most surprising because most people don't think of it as a food, but as a beverage, black coffee. Coffee contains chlorogenic acid, a compound with clearly documented effects on liver enzyme activity and on hepatic phase 2 detoxification, regardless of caffeine content. A large meta-analysis from 2017, combining 17 studies with over 2.5 million participants, found that daily coffee consumption reduces the incidence of liver cirrhosis by 40%. That is one of the largest dietary intervention effects ever documented for liver disease in the peer-reviewed literature. A later investigation from the National Institutes of Health showed that 3 cups of black coffee per day reduced ALT and AST liver enzymes by 20 to 30%. This was measured specifically in adults with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the population most at risk from chronic microplastic exposure. The mechanism does not lie in caffeine itself, but in the polyphenolic compounds, chlorogenic acid, cafestol, and caweol, all of which act on phase 2 enzymes through documented pathways. But again, a trap appears. Single-serve coffee capsules made of aluminum and plastic can release microplastic into the beverage, especially at the high temperatures of capsule machines. A study from 2022 found that a single plastic coffee capsule releases approximately 200 microplastic particles per cup. Not enormous per cup, but cumulatively meaningful over years of daily exposure. The solution is simple. Use filter coffee with a paper filter, a French press with a stainless steel mesh, or a classical espresso machine without plastic components in the brewing path. The dose, 2 to 3 cups per day, black, no sugar. Ideally before 9 in the morning to avoid disrupting your natural cortisol rhythm into the afternoon and evening. If you are over 60 and have hypertension, talk to your doctor before settling on a daily amount because caffeine can raise systolic pressure by 10 to 15 points in some older adults. What you can expect after 14 days of consistent use of all 5 foods: improved digestion in week 1, clearer skin tone around day 10, more sustained afternoon energy by week 2. What only becomes measurable after 8 to 12 weeks of consistent use: lower liver enzyme readings on a blood test, reduced systemic inflammation markers like CRP, and improved glutathione concentration in liver cells. Now, to the honest note you deserve before trying any of this in your kitchen tomorrow morning. None of these 5 foods removes microplastic that has already accumulated in your tissues. Current research literature has no method that can demonstrate that with hard evidence in humans. What these foods actually do is support your phase 2 detoxification, reduce the binding of new particles in the gut, and lower the inflammation triggered by particles already accumulated. That is not small. It means your liver processes the daily input more efficiently, and you carry less systemic inflammation, which can be measured in energy, sleep quality, and skin clarity over weeks. But if anyone is selling you a product that claims to flush microplastic completely out of your body, that is a claim with no current evidence behind it in the peer-reviewed literature. 3 common mistakes I want you to avoid before you even try this once. Mistake 1, introducing all 5 foods at the same time on day 1. That overwhelms the digestive system, especially the combination of psyllium and turmeric on a stomach that is not adjusted. Begin with 1 food per week, add the next only when digestion has settled, and give your body the time to integrate each new input before stacking another on top. Mistake 2, taking turmeric without pepper and without fat. Without those 2 cofactors, bioavailability stays under 3%, and you are essentially wasting the dose you bought. Mistake 3, cooking broccoli sprouts. Heat above 60 degrees Celsius destroys sulforaphane completely, so always raw or very lightly steam for no more than 2 minutes total. One thing before this video closes: these 5 foods are not expensive, not exotic, and they do not work overnight, but they work consistently over weeks and months. If this video clicked for you, subscribe. There's a new video on this channel every day on the next strange thing your body is doing right now. And if you want the full Reset 14-day protocol, day by day, with dosages and timing, first link below. Less than $10, less than a single coffee per day for 2 weeks. Your body is running software that has not been updated in 200,000 years. Tomorrow's video is about something connected to everything we just covered. It works on the same phase 2 detoxification system, but in a direction you will not expect. That is next.